He was Donovan Volkov, a man whose name was only ever spoken in hushed tones in the back rooms of Chicago's oldest establishments. He commanded an empire built on shadows and steel, and tonight he was closing a deal worth $100 million. He had it all figured out. But he forgot one variable: the waitress, the woman he'd looked through a dozen times, who was about to save his life and ruin it by whispering 5 simple words. That's the wrong formula. The air in Bellinot was so thick with cultivated wealth it felt like breathing through velvet. It was a Tuesday night in Chicago, but in this room the calendar was irrelevant. Time was measured in the hushed pop of champagne corks and the silent slide of $100 bills. Claire Sullivan felt the familiar ache in her lower back, a dull throb that kept time with the restaurant's discreet jazz trio. She was a ghost in a black apron, her movements fluid and practiced, her face a mask of polite indifference. Her only goal was to make it through the next 4 hours, collect her tips, and return to her tiny, anonymous apartment in Lincoln Park. Claire was not meant to be a ghost. She was, or had been, Dr. Claire Sullivan, a name that once held the promise of academic journals and breakthrough patents. Now she was just Claire, the server who knew to bring extra lemon twists for Mrs. Davenport, and to never, ever interrupt Mr. Henderson when he was on his phone. Tonight, the tension was different. It wasn't the usual buzz of lawyers and bankers. This was a heavy, cold silence emanating from the patrons' room at the back. The private dining room, with its own entrance and a one-way mirror looking out, was reserved for him. Donovan Volkov. Claire had only seen him once before, but she'd recognized him instantly from the Tribune's less-than-flattering shadow business exposés. He was tall, with the severe, tailored lines of a man who found comfort in control. His suit was a dark, sharkskin grey that probably cost more than her entire student debt. His hair was black, his eyes a pale, assessing grey that missed nothing. He was flanked by his ever-present lieutenant, Julian, a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same cold marble. They weren't alone. Their guest had arrived 20 minutes prior, all teeth and cologne. Claire had carded him mentally, a Brioni suit, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, and the frictionless charm of a man who had never been told no. This was Marcus Thorne. He was the broker, the legitimate face. Claire's manager, Daniel, had pulled her aside, his face pale. "The patrons' room, Claire. Just be fast. Be invisible. They requested the 98 Barolo." She'd nodded, her stomach clenching. Serving Volkov was like serving a dormant volcano. For an hour, she had been the perfect ghost. She refilled water. She brought bread. She decanted the expensive wine with a steady hand she didn't feel. They ignored her, which was precisely the point. Their conversation was low, a rumble of terms, logistics, overseas transfer, final signature. "A $100 million deal," Daniel had whispered, "a buyout of some new chemical processing venture." The deal was culminating. Marcus Thorne slid a sleek silver tablet across the mahogany table. "As you can see, Donovan, the molecular schematic is perfect. Purity is 99.9%. Our friends in Geneva have already verified the synthesis." Donovan Volkov leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the screen. He didn't look at the profit margins or the transfer details. He looked at the complex string of letters and numbers, the intricate dance of hexagons and bonds that represented a molecule. He was a businessman, yes, but he was a meticulous one. He believed in understanding the product, whether it was whiskey or weapons. "It holds," Thorne said, sensing the close. "Stable, untraceable, and a complete game-changer." Volkov nodded slowly, his hand moving to an expensive-looking pen. Julian stood impassively by the door, a statue guarding a tomb. Claire moved in to clear the appetizer plates. It was bad timing, but the plates couldn't sit. Be invisible. She reached for Thorne's plate, her eyes automatically sliding past the tablet. And then she froze. It was only for a second. A single, heart-stopping beat. Her brain, the one that had spent 8 years memorizing the language of organic chemistry, kicked into gear. The formula on the screen, the complex chain. She saw it. She saw the flaw. She didn't mean to say it. It was a reflex, the same instinct that makes a mathematician correct a sum. It was barely a breath, a whisper lost in the clink of silverware. That's the wrong formula. But the patron's room was built for acoustics that carried secrets, and in the heavy silence, her whisper cracked through the air like a gunshot. The clinking stopped. Volkov's hand, holding the pen, froze mid-air. Marcus Thorne's easy smile faltered, and Julian, the marble statue, moved. He was at her side in an instant, his hand clamping onto her arm, his grip a vice of cold, compressed steel. Claire's breath hitched, a tiny squeak of pure terror. Donovan Volkov slowly, very slowly, lifted his pale grey eyes from the tablet. He didn't look at Thorne. He didn't look at Julian. He looked right at her. "What?" he said, his voice not loud, but carrying the weight of the entire city. "Did you just say?" The world contracted to the space of a single breath. Claire's vision tunneled. All she could see were Donovan Volkov's eyes. They weren't angry. They were worse. They were intensely, terrifyingly curious. Julian's grip on her arm was a burning shackle, his fingers digging into the bone. "I'm sorry, sir," Claire stammered, the practiced subservience of her job warring with the cold panic flooding her veins. "I misspoke. I was clearing the plate." "Donovan, for God's sake!" Marcus Thorne scoffed, recovering his composure with a forced, dismissive laugh. He waved a manicured hand. "It's a Waitress. She probably thought it was a new cocktail recipe. Let's get this done." He pushed the tablet an inch closer to Volkov. "Sign the transfer." Volkov didn't move. His gaze remained locked on Claire. "Julian, let her go." Julian's grip loosened, but he didn't step away. He was a coiled spring, ready to strike. "You," Volkov said to Claire, his voice quiet but absolute. "You said, that's the wrong formula. Explain." This was it. The moment her life diverged. She could lie, play dumb, and maybe, just maybe, be fired instead of disappearing into a concrete pour at the new stadium. Or she could tell the truth. The ghost of Dr. Claire Sullivan, the woman who had been silenced, screamed in the back of her mind. She took a shaky breath. "The formula on the screen, sir? It's for Z-isomer 7. Thorne's face twitched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes. But Claire saw it. And she knew, with sickening certainty, that Volkov saw it too. "Go on," Volkov said. Claire's fear was still there, a cold stone in her stomach, but the familiar cadence of her old life, the language of science, took over. Her voice steadied, losing its servile tremor and gaining the crisp precision of a lecturer. "It's a common synthesis cheat," she said, her eyes fixed on the molecule displayed on the tablet. "It's cheaper and faster to produce, but it's unstable. That particular stereoisomer. It's photochemically and thermally volatile. It degrades." "Degrades?" Volkov repeated, the word hanging in the air. "By 40% in 72 hours, under standard, non-refrigerated transport," Claire said flatly. "The R-isomer, which is what I assume you think you're buying, is the stable one. But it requires a different pathway, a palladium catalyst, and stabilization with a tertiary amine group. This," she pointed a trembling finger at the screen, "this is Z-isomer 7. In 3 days, you'll be shipping $100 million worth of aspirin and chalk. It's a worthless molecule. It's the wrong formula. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a $100 million deal imploding. Marcus Thorne went pale, then a dangerous, mottled red. "This is absurd! Who is this child? She's a nobody! Donovan, are you really going to listen to this?" "She's right," Volkov said. Thorne's mouth snapped shut. "She's right, isn't she, Marcus?" Volkov's voice was soft, conversational, which was somehow more terrifying than if he had shouted. He still hadn't looked away from Claire. "Because you're sweating, and a man with a $100 million deal on the line, a man who knows his product is pure, doesn't sweat when the help speaks." Volkov finally turned his head, his pale eyes pinning Thorne to his chair. "You were going to sell me chalk." "Donovan, this is a misunderstanding," Thorne began, his voice suddenly high and reedy. "Julian," Volkov said. Julian was already moving. He grabbed Claire's arm again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was a relocation. He pulled her from the center of the room, behind Volkov's chair, as if shielding a valuable asset. "Get her out of here," Volkov ordered, his voice clipped. "Take her to the kitchen. Wait for me." "Sir," Claire whispered, terrified again. "Go," he commanded. Julian didn't hesitate, pulling her through the service door just as it swung shut. The last thing Claire heard was Volkov's voice, as smooth and cold as Riverstone, speaking to the trapped broker. "Marcus, we have a problem. A very, very expensive problem. And I need you to explain to me, very, very slowly, why I shouldn't have Julian solve it for you right here." The service door closed, cutting off the sound, and Claire was left in the clattering, stainless steel chaos of the kitchen, her apron still on, her world spinning off its axis. A dishwasher looked at her, then at the menacing figure of Julian, and wisely turned back to his steam. "You will not speak," Julian said, his voice a low gravel. "You will not move. You will wait for the boss." Claire nodded, her knees threatening to buckle. She leaned against a metal prep counter, the smell of garlic and old wine filling her lungs. She had just saved the most dangerous man in Chicago $100 million. She had also, she realized with a dawning, icy horror, just signed Marcus Thorne's death warrant, and she had no idea what that made her. The kitchen bustled around her, a world of steam and clanging pans, but Claire and Julian existed in a silent bubble of menace. The chefs and other servers gave them a wide berth, their eyes sliding past the pair as if they didn't exist. Claire's adrenaline-fueled precision had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep, trembling exhaustion. She had been standing for what felt like hours, though the kitchen clock told her it had only been 47 minutes. 47 minutes since her life had been cleaved in two, before and after. The service door swung open. It wasn't Volkov, it was Daniel, the manager, his face ashen. He looked at Julian, then at Claire, and seemed to shrink. "Sir," Daniel said to Julian, "her shift is over. She clock out?" Julian didn't even look at him. "The boss will decide when she is done." The door opened again. This time it was Volkov. He looked as immaculate as he had when he walked in. Not a hair was out of place. His grey suit was increased. He walked past the friars and the prep line as if he were strolling through a museum. Marcus Thorne was not with him. Claire's stomach did a sick, lurching flip. She didn't want to know what had happened in that room. Volkov stopped in front of her. The kitchen sound seemed to fade again. "My car," he said to Julian. Then he looked at Claire. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a request. "Sir, I have my coat in the locker," she stammered, the mundane words sounding insane in the context. "Julian will get it. Give him your key." Numbly, she fumbled in her apron pocket and handed over the small key. Julian vanished and returned in seconds, holding her cheap, worn peacoat. He didn't hand it to her. He just held it. "Let's go," Volkov said, turning and walking out the back service exit, the one that led to the alley. Claire followed, Julian right behind her, a human wall. The cold night air hit her like a slap, clearing her head for a terrifying second. An idling black A-level sedan, so clean it looked like a void in the grime of the alley, sat waiting. The driver's door was open, but no one was in it. Julian, she realized, was the driver. He opened the rear door. "Get in," Volkov said. Claire looked at the dark, opulent interior of the car. This was how people disappeared. "Where are we going?" Volkov paused, one hand on the car roof. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold assessment in his eyes. Was it amusement? "Claire Sullivan," he said, and the sound of her full name from his lips sent a shiver down her spine. "You just cost a man his reputation, his freedom, and very likely his life. You saved me $100 million, and you did it all while serving Barolo. I am not going to hurt you. But you are, without question, the biggest complication to my business in the last 5 years. Get in the car." She got in. The leather was impossibly soft. Julian slid into the driver's seat, and the car pulled away with a silent, powerful hum. They drove north, up Lake Shore Drive, the black, churning water of Lake Michigan on one side, the glittering skyline on the other. They didn't go to an industrial warehouse or a dark basement. They pulled into the private underground garage of one of the newest, most obscenely luxurious high-rises, a building that twisted into the sky. A private elevator opened directly into the penthouse. The apartment was vast, cold, and minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offered a god's-eye view of Chicago. The furniture was all black leather, chrome and glass. It was less a home than a fortress of solitude. "Drink?" Volkov asked, walking to a bar that held nothing but a few crystal decanters and a single perfect orchid. "I know, thank you." He poured one for himself, a dark, amber liquid. He turned, swirling the glass. "You were a PhD candidate, University of Chicago, organic chemistry. Your dissertation was on novel synthetic pathways for stabilized isomeric compounds. You dropped out 6 months before defense. Your academic sponsor was Dr. Aris Thorne." Claire's blood ran cold. It had been less than 2 hours. "How? You think I would let the person who saved me, $100 million, sit in my kitchen without knowing who she was?" Volkov said. "My people are efficient. You're not a waitress, Dr. Sullivan. You're a chemist, a brilliant one, according to your former department head, before you were blackballed." The old familiar bitterness rose in her throat. "Aris Thorne," she said, her voice shaking, but this time with anger, not fear. "He's Marcus's father." Volkov nodded, taking a slow sip. "I gathered. You accused him of stealing your research. The university sided with him. You lost your funding, your reputation, and your future. You ended up with $200,000 in student debt and a job at Bellanot." "He stole my life," Claire said, the words torn from her. "That formula is the real one, the stable R isomer. That was my work. That was my dissertation. Marcus was trying to sell you a cheap, flawed, stolen copy of my invention." Volkov stared at her, the pieces clicking into place. "So when you saw that screen, it wasn't just a chemist seeing an error. It was an artist seeing her masterpiece defaced." "It was a cheat," she whispered, and I couldn't not say it. "A very expensive act of conscience," he mused. He walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. "You've created a problem, Claire. 2, in fact. First, Marcus Thorne will not recover from this. His associates, the people he was brokering for, will be unhappy. They will trace the failure back to its source. The deal failed at Bellanot. They will look for the person who spoke. They will look for you. Claire's stomach turned to ice. She hadn't thought that far. Which leads to my second problem, he continued, turning back to her. You saved me $100 million. In my world, a debt like that is as binding as a contract written in blood. I cannot, in good conscience, let those people find you. I have a debt to you. He set his glass down. But I am also a businessman, and I see an opportunity. He stepped closer. He didn't menace her. He simply focused. His presence was overwhelming. You're in danger, you're in debt, and you are a brilliant chemist whose work has just been proven to be worth a great deal of money. I can solve all three of your problems, and you, in turn, can solve one of mine. What problem? She asked, her voice barely audible. My $100 million problem, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. The deal is dead, but the product, the real product, I still want it. He held out his hand. I can give you protection, Claire. I can wipe out your debt. I can give you a laboratory that would make the University of Chicago weep with envy. All I ask in return is that you synthesize your masterpiece. The real formula. For me. Claire looked at his outstretched hand. It was a strong hand, clean, with unadorned, perfectly manicured nails. A civilized hand. But it was a hand that, just an hour ago, had dismissed a man to an unknown, brutal fate. Taking it wasn't just accepting a job, it was crossing a threshold. It was leaving the world of ghosts and shadows, the Waitress world, and entering his. This is insane, she breathed. I'm a logistician, Volkov interrupted smoothly. I move product, some legal, some less so. But I have a code. I do not deal in defective product, and I pay my debts, and I despise being cheated. He nodded toward the window. Out there, you are Dr. Sullivan, the disgraced student, the waitress. In here, with me, you could be the person who actually finishes her life's work. The choice is yours. She thought of her cramped apartment, the overdue bills, the constant gnawing fear of her student loan servicer. She thought of Aris Thorne, sitting in his endowed chair, built on her stolen genius. She thought of Marcus, his smug, dismissive laugh. And she thought of the men who would now be looking for the waitress who talked. He'll try to kill me, she said, the realization hitting her. Marcus, or his father, or his associates. They will, Volkov agreed, his face devoid of emotion. They can't afford a loose end like you. Julian is already having your apartment cleared out. You will not be going back there. You will, for all intents and purposes, cease to exist. The finality of it was terrifying. And if I say no, Volkov's gaze hardened slightly, then I will give you a new name, a new social security number, and a one-way, first-class ticket to any city in the world that has no extradition treaty. I will consider my $100 million debt paid, and I will wish you luck. You'd be on your own. On my own, she repeated, hunted, forever looking over her shoulder. She looked back at his hand. This wasn't a choice. It was an illusion of one. It was one cage for another. But this new cage, it had a laboratory, it had power, and it had the one thing she hadn't had in years, a purpose. I have a condition, she said, shocked at her own audacity. Volkov's eyebrow raised. You're in a poor position to negotiate. I don't care, she said, finding a core of steel she didn't know she possessed. I'll make your product. I'll make it perfect. But I want him. I want Aris Thorne. I don't want him hurt, she added quickly, seeing the look in his eye. I want him ruined, the way he ruined me. I want my name cleared. I want the world to know he's a fraud, and I'm the one who created that formula." Volkov was silent for a long moment. He studied her, his pale eyes searching for a crack, a weakness. He found none. He found only resolve. Finally, he smiled, a true, thin, and dangerous smile. "Revenge," he said, "a motive I understand completely, and far more reliable than money." He finally dropped his hand, the offer rescinded. This was a new deal. "We will do it your way," he said. "But first, we do it my way. You will prove your worth. You will make the product. Once the first shipment is complete, stable and verified, I will personally hand you the matches to burn Aris Thorne's world to the ground. Do we have an agreement, Dr. Sullivan?" She met his gaze. "We have an agreement, Mr. Volkov." "Good." He nodded. The business concluded. "Julian." His lieutenant, who had been standing silently by the elevator, stepped forward. "Boss, Dr. Sullivan will be staying in the secondary suite. She is our guest. She is to be afforded every courtesy. She is also not to leave this building without my express permission. Her new lab, is it ready?" "Fulton Market warehouse is clean," Julian said, his voice flat. His dark eyes flickered to Claire, full of suspicion. He did not like this. He did not like her. The ventilation system was triple filtered as requested. The new equipment from Germany arrives at Euro 600. "Excellent," Volkov said. "You'll have your lab by morning, Doctor. Tonight, you rest. You are no longer Claire the waitress. You are my new, very expensive, very secret head of research and development." The next few weeks were a blur. Claire was moved from the penthouse to a secure, luxurious apartment in the same building. Her world became a sterile, high-tech loop. Every morning, Julian would drive her in the black sedan to the nondescript warehouse in Fulton Market. From the outside, it was just another brick-and-mortar relic of Chicago's industrial past. Inside, Volkov had built a chemical fortress. It was a state-of-the-art organic synthesis lab, better equipped than anything she'd had at the university. He had spared no expense. And Claire came alive. This was her element. The smell of solvents, the hum of the NMR machine, the precise, beautiful logic of molecules. The fear receded, replaced by a white-hot focus. She wasn't just recreating her old work, she was perfecting it. Volkov visited. Not often, but his visits were memorable. He would stand in the doorway of the lab in one of his immaculate suits, a stark contrast to the stainless steel and white coats. He wouldn't pretend to understand the deep science. He would ask different questions. How much? How fast? What are the bottlenecks? What is the transport risk? "It's not just stable," she explained to him one evening, holding up a small vial of clear, viscous liquid. She was wired, high on caffeine and success. "I've added a binding agent, a simple sugar molecule. Standard blood tests will read it as glucose. It's completely invisible until it hits the bloodstream. It's perfect." He took the vial, rolling it between his fingers. He was fascinated, not by the chemistry, but by her, by the passion, the obsessive focus. "You love this," he stated. It wasn't a question. It's what I do. It's who I am." "You were born to be a creator, Claire," he said, his voice low. "And they tried to make you a servant. A terrible waste." A strange, dangerous intimacy was growing between them. It wasn't romance, it was something darker. A mutual respect between two masters of their craft, the alchemist and the king. He was enthralled by her mind, and she was, against all her better judgment, drawn to his power. The way he moved, the way he commanded the world around him with a few quiet words. He was the only person who had ever seen her true worth. Julian watched it all, his distrust growing. "She's a civilian, boss," he'd said to Volkov one night in the car after they'd left Claire at the lab. "She's a weak point. This is getting complicated." "She is not a weak point, Julian," Volkov had replied, staring out at the rain. "She's the new weapon, and she is anything but a civilian. She's just been fighting a different kind of war. And complicated is just another word for interesting." Marcus Thorne had not been solved by Julian. Volkov was more subtle than that. A man who vanishes leaves questions. A man who is ruined serves as an example. The day after the Bellinotto disaster, Volkov had made 2 calls. The first was to the Swiss bank holding the $100 million in escrow. The second was to the leader of the international cartel Thorne was brokering for, a man who did not appreciate being associated with chalk. By sunrise, Marcus Thorne's credit lines were frozen, his reputation was shattered, and he had been disavowed by his own father, the desperate Aris Thorne, who was terrified of Volkov's reach. Marcus was a pariah, and a pariah with no protection in a city like Chicago was a dead man walking. But a cornered rat is a dangerous animal. Thorne was furious. He'd lost everything. He knew, instinctively, that the Waitress was the key. He couldn't get to Volkov. He couldn't get to the cartel. But he could find the girl. His first move was clumsy. He hired a trio of low-level thugs to grab Claire from her apartment. They found the apartment empty, already cleaned out. They moved on to Bellinotto. Julian's team had been waiting. They'd anticipated the move. The confrontation was brief, brutal, and utterly silent. The thugs were bundled into a van and dropped off at a police station in a different county, drugged and with no memory of the last 12 hours. A clear message had been sent. The girl is protected. She belongs to Volkov. This only confirmed Thorne's suspicion. The Waitress wasn't just a random event. She was Volkov's new asset. Claire, safe in her lab, knew nothing of this. She was deep in her work, synthesizing the first test batch. She had finalized the new formula. It was stable. It was potent. And, as she'd promised, it was completely untraceable. It was worth, she calculated, far, far more than $100 million. She presented the final product, a kilogram of perfectly white, crystalline powder, to Volkov in the lab. He looked at it, then at her. "It's done," she said. "It's beautiful," he replied, and she knew he meant the science, the purity of her creation. "Now," he said, "we prepare for our first investor." This was the part Claire hadn't considered. She was a scientist. He was a logistician. She made it. He sold it. And his buyers were not the kind of people who signed polite contracts. Volkov was setting up a new deal, not with the cartel Thorne had used, but with a rival faction, the notoriously old-school Gallo family, run by the aging but still lethal Marco Gallo. Gallo was everything Volkov was not, loud, traditional, and rooted in the old ways. But he had the distribution network in Europe. An alliance would make them both untouchable. Thorne got wind of the new deal. He was desperate, living on borrowed time, and he saw one last, insane move. He couldn't get to Claire, and he couldn't get to Volkov, but he could poison the well. He used the last of his connections to plant a snitch inside Volkov's organization, a low-level accountant with access to shipping manifests. Thorne then fed this information. Specific routes, container numbers, delivery times for one of Volkov's legitimate electronics shipments, directly to Marco Gallo. The message was simple. Volkov is weak. He's exposed. He can't even protect his own shipments. But I know his organization inside and out. Work with me, not him. The hit was a disaster. Gallo, testing Thorne's information, intercepted the shipment at the rail yards in Pullman. 2 of Volkov's men were killed. A $5 million shipment of high-end graphics cards was lost. The news hit Volkov's penthouse like a bomb. Julian was apoplectic. He stormed into the penthouse where Volkov and Claire were going over lab logistics. "The Pullman shipment is gone," Julian roared, a crack in his marble facade. "Gallows people, 2 dead. This is her fault." He jabbed a finger at Claire. Claire recoiled as if struck. "What? How? This never happened before her." Julian stalked the room, radiating violence. "You brought a civilian into our house, boss. You put her on a pedestal. You're distracted. The whole organization sees it. It makes you look weak. And now Thorne is playing us against Gallo and we're bleeding. She's a liability. A curse." Volkov sat, unmoving, his steepled fingers hiding his mouth. The air crackled with Julian's rage and Claire's fear. She looked at Volkov, expecting him to defend her. But his face was a mask of cold fury. He was angry, angrier than she had ever seen him. "Julian is right," Volkov said, his voice dangerously low. Claire's heart stopped. "You are a liability," he said, his pale eyes pinning her. "Your very existence has brought a war to my doorstep. It has cost me men. It has cost me money." "I didn't," she stammered. "Get her out of my sight," Volkov snarled at Julian. "Take her back to the lab. Lock it down. No one in, no one out. I have to clean up this mess." Julian's face was a mask of grim satisfaction. He grabbed Claire's arm, just as he had at the restaurant all those weeks ago, and hauled her toward the elevator. She looked back, betrayed, at Donovan Volkov. He wouldn't even meet her eyes. He was just a Mafia boss, after all, and she was just a tool, one that had just become more trouble than it was worth. As the elevator doors slid shut, Claire Sullivan realized, with a chilling new terror, that she was truly, utterly alone. For 3 days, Claire was a prisoner in her own gilded cage. The lab was sealed. Julian's men, grim-faced and silent, were posted at the only exit. They brought her food on paper plates and spoke to no one. Her access to the outside world, her phone, her laptop, was cut. There was only the lab, the chemicals, and the thrumming, silent fear. Julian's words echoed in her mind. Liability, Volkov's cold dismissal. Get her out of my sight. She had been a fool, a naive, arrogant fool. She had let the power, the resources, the dark intimacy with Volkov blind her. She had believed she was his partner, his alchemist. But she was just a formula, a high-value asset. And now that she was a complicated asset, she was being shelved. Or worse. What happened when he finished cleaning up his mess? Would she be the last loose end? On the 4th day, the steel door hissed open. It wasn't Julian, it was Donovan Volkov. He looked tired. The immaculate suit was slightly rumpled, his tie was loosened, and he had the dark shadow of a 24-hour beard. He looked at her, standing by the inactive gas chromatograph, her arms crossed, her eyes defiant and terrified. "You look terrible," she said, her voice hoarse. A small, weary smile touched his lips. "You look angry." "Good." "You locked me in here," she accused. "I protected you," he corrected, walking into the lab. "Thorne is desperate. He's broadcasting. He sent Gallo proof of his snitch. He was trying to prove his value, to take your place as my new partner." "And Gallo? Marco Gallo is old school," Volkov said. "He hates 2 things, untraceable product he doesn't control, and traitors. He was interested. The Pullman hit was a test, to see if Thorne's information was good." "And it was," Claire said, her stomach twisting. "Your men—" "My men were fine," Volkov said. Claire froze. "They were my most loyal. And they were told to take a paid vacation. The graphics cards were 40,000 pounds of slag. The dead men are in their homes in Wisconsin, with a very nice bonus." Claire's mind spun, trying to catch up. The hit it was? Staged, Volkov said. A decoy. A performance. I needed to know two things. One, was Thorne's snitch real? And two, how would Gallo react? Thorne's snitch was real, and Gallo, he took the bait. He loved it. He thought he had me. And Julian, she whispered, his anger? Julian is a very fine actor, Volkov said, a flicker of pride in his eyes. He was also genuinely furious that I let it get that far. He hates you, Dr. Sullivan, because he's loyal. He sees you as the variable I can't control. And he was right to be angry. The breach was real. The accountant who was Thorne's snitch, he's no longer an issue. Claire digested this. The betrayal she felt had been a lie. The whole thing was a performance. You let me think, you let me sit in here, terrified, thinking you were going to... He stepped closer, his gaze intense. I let you sit in here, safe, while I confirmed that Thorne's only play was to use my own organization against me. I let you stay here, the one place he couldn't reach, while I set the final board. The final board? Marco Gallo is impressed, Volkov said. He loves Thorne's audacity, but he's a traditionalist. He doesn't trust a man who betrays one boss to join another. He wants a face-to-face. He wants to meet Thorne and me. He's holding a dinner. To mediate. To decide who he's going to back. He's going to kill one of you, Claire said. He's going to pick a partner, Volkov countered, and he's going to eliminate the competition. Thorne thinks he's coming to be crowned. He thinks he's bringing Gallo my head on a platter. And you? I'm bringing him the truth. Volkov walked to the steel safe where she kept the master sample. And I'm bringing him the product. He turned to her. Which is why you're coming with me. Claire's blood went cold. No, absolutely not. I'm a chemist. I'm not that. Yes, you are, he said, his voice hardening. You are the formula. You are the proof. Thorne is selling a story. You are selling the truth. Gallo is an old man. He respects strength. But more than that, he respects creation. He won't believe me. He won't believe the data. But he will believe you. He will believe the artist. He went to the small closet where she kept her lab coats. Tucked in the back was the black Roland Mouret dress he'd had delivered to her apartment weeks ago, a dress she'd assumed was a strange, inappropriate gift. Go change, he said. The dinner is in 1 hour, at Bellanot. The circle was closing. Bellanot was different this time. The restaurant was closed to the public. The only car out front was Marco Gallo's armored Escalade. When Claire walked in on Donovan Volkov's arm, she was no longer a ghost in an apron. The simple, brutally elegant black dress clung to her. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes, which had been downcast for years, were level and cold. She was, in every way, transformed. They were in the patron's room, the same table. Marco Gallo was at the head. He was a small, round man in an expensive suit, with the benevolent face of a favorite uncle and the dead, black eyes of a shark. Marcus Thorne was already there, seated at Gallo's right. When he saw Claire, his smug expression dissolved into pure, unadulterated shock, which he quickly masked with a sneer. "Donovan, so glad you could make it," Thorne said, his voice oily. "And you brought the help. How sentimental. Does she pour the wine, or just validate the chemistry?" Volkov ignored him, pulling out a chair for Claire. He sat, placing a small, sealed vial of white powder on the table. "Marcus," Gallo said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "You tell me this man," he nodded at Volkov, "is weak, that his organization is compromised. You gave me proof, a good haul at Pullman." "As I said, Marco," Thorne leaned forward. "He's distracted. This woman, she's got him chasing a ghost. His entire operation is crumbling." Volkov sat silently, watching. And you, Donovan? Gallo turned to him. You let a $5 million shipment get taken. Your men are dead. You come to me, weak, and ask for an alliance? Volkov leaned forward. The shipment was slag, Marco. The men are on vacation. It was a test. One that your people passed, and one that Mr. Thorne, here, failed. Thorne's face went white. He's lying. He's trying to cover his... The information was good, Volkov said, cutting him off. His snitch was real, an accountant named David Peters. He's been dealt with. But Thorne's entire premise is the lie. He's not selling you strength. He's selling you his weakness, his desperation. He came to you with my roots because he has nothing else to offer. Gallo looked from Volkov to Thorne, his eyes dark. He also offered me the formula, the one that you were supposed to get. He said he has the chemist. He has a chemist, Volkov said. A cheap knockoff. I have the chemist. He nodded to Claire. This was her moment. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking under the table. She looked at Thorne's hateful, panicked face. She looked at Gallo's calculating stare. And she looked at Volkov, who was watching her with an unnerving, absolute confidence. He had staked his life, his entire organization, on her. She stopped shaking. She picked up the vial. This, she said, her voice clear and carrying in the quiet room, is the formula. She looked at Marcus. Hello, Marcus. You remember me. I'm Dr. Claire Sullivan, the one whose work your father stole, the work you tried to sell to Mr. Volkov. The wrong work. She turned to Gallo. Mr. Gallo, Marcus is offering you Z-Soma 7. It's unstable. It degrades by 40% in 72 hours. It's worthless. He knows this, because I'm the one who told Mr. Volkov. Thorne leapt to his feet. She's lying. This is a trick. Sit down, Marcus, Gallo growled. Claire continued, her voice gaining strength. This, she held up the vial, is R-Isomer 12, my creation. It is 99.9% pure. It is perfectly stable. And, she pushed the vial toward him, it's bound to a sucroses molecule. It is completely invisible to every field test, every blood panel. It is a ghost. It is, in every sense of the word, a perfect product. Gallo stared at the vial. He looked at Claire, then at Volkov. He saw the truth. He saw the power. He saw a product that wasn't just 100 million, it was 1 billion. So, Marcus, Gallo said, leaning back, you came to me. You lied. You brought me a weak product based on stolen information, and you used a traitor to do it. Marco, no, Thorne was sweating, his eyes darting to the door. Julian was standing in front of it. Donovan, Gallo said, came to me with a test of loyalty. He sacrificed a pawn to see if I was a king. And then he brought me the queen. He nodded at Claire. Gallo picked up the vial. A new partnership. He looked at Volkov. To us. He then looked at Marcus Thorne, his face full of a terrible, sad disappointment. And you, Marcus, you are a liability. It was the last word Marcus Thorne would ever hear. He lunged, not for Volkov, but for Claire, his face a mask of primal rage. He never made it. Julian intercepted him, a blur of motion, a single, muffled sound, and it was over. Claire didn't flinch. She just watched, the alchemist who had finally, truly, balanced her own equation. The ride back to the penthouse was silent. The city lights smeared past the tinted windows of the sedan, a watercolor of blurred neon. Claire sat beside Donovan, the space between them charged. The black dress felt less like a costume and more like a uniform. She had watched a man die. She had watched him be handled by Julian with a clean, terrifying efficiency. And the most terrifying part? She felt nothing. No, that was a lie. She felt satisfied. A cold, hard satisfaction. When they entered the penthouse, The view of the city seemed sharper, the lights brighter. Volkov didn't turn on the lamps. They stood in the dark, illuminated only by the glittering sprawl of Chicago below. He went to the bar, just as he had that first night. He poured 2 glasses this time. He handed one to her. His fingers brushed hers. It was the first time they had touched as equals. "To the Queen," he said, raising his glass. "To the partnership," she replied, her voice steady. They drank. The whiskey was smoky and smooth, burning a clean line down her throat. "It's done," he said. "The deal with Gallo is signed. We control the entire synthetic market from here to the Danube." "And Thorn?" "Thorn and his entire failed enterprise are a lesson," Volkov said. "He will vanish. No one will look for him." Claire walked to the massive window, looking down at the ants-on loops of Lakeshore Drive. "But it's not done. Not really." He came to stand beside her. She could feel the heat of him, the coiled energy he always carried. "Horace Thorn," she said, "you made me a promise." Volkov's reflection smiled in the glass. "I did." He walked to his desk and picked up a slim manila file. He handed it to her. She opened it. Inside were not threats or blackmail. It was a formal letter from the University of Chicago, addressed to the Board of Regents. It was an anonymous, but heavily documented, complaint of academic fraud, filed by a concerned group of alumni. It included her original, time-stamped research data, which Julian's tech team had resurrected from her old, discarded hard drives. It included financial records showing payments from pharmaceutical companies to Horace Thorn before his discovery. It included a full, damning timeline. "The board convened an emergency session this afternoon," Volkov said quietly. "While you were getting dressed, Dr. Thorn has been suspended. His endowed chair is under review. The Tribune got an anonymous tip. It will be on the front page tomorrow." "You didn't threaten him?" "I didn't have to," Volkov said. "Men like Thorn are not afraid of brutes. They are terrified of exposure. He built his life on a reputation. I simply provided a correction. By tomorrow, every academic in his field will know he's a fraud. He'll be a pariah. He won't be able to teach at a community college." She closed the file. It was over. He had kept his word. He had ruined him, just as she had asked. He had balanced the equation. "Thank you," she said. It felt like an inadequate word. "You earned it," he replied. "You created a formula worth hundreds of millions. I just cleared the path for it." He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was electric, not with passion, but with power. "That night at Bellanot, you were the only one in the room telling the truth. You were the only one who wasn't lying. To me, or to yourself." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "In my world, Claire, that makes you the most dangerous person I have ever met." She didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. She met his pale, assessing gaze, and for the first time, she saw a reflection of herself. The scientist. The creator. The killer. "I'm not a waitress anymore," she whispered. "No," he said, his lips just an inch from hers. "You're not." His hand moved from her jaw to the back of her neck, pulling her closer. "You're the new formula, and you're mine." He kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of love or of tenderness. It was a kiss of contract, a synthesis, a seal. It tasted of whiskey and power and cold, beautiful, perfect chemistry. It was the fusion of 2 worlds, the alchemist and the king, forged into a new, terrifying element. As they stood against the glass, the city their witness, Claire Sullivan, knew she had not been saved. She had been forged, and together they were about to burn the world down, just to see what new, beautiful and dangerous things could rise from the ashes, and so The waitress and the boss rewrote the rules. They didn't just close the deal, they became the deal. But as we all know, in their world, every partnership is a new kind of war, and the formula for power is always written in blood. What do you think happens next? Does the Gallo alliance hold? And what happens when Dr. Aris Thorne decides he has nothing left to lose? If you loved this story of vengeance, chemistry, and dark romance, then you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. Click the bell so you never miss a new episode. We have so many more stories waiting in the shadows. Let us know in the comments below what you want to see next, or